Federal Aviation Administration is raising alarm at the number of laser strikes against aircraft in recent years. The FAA started keeping track of strikes back in 2010. Since then, there's been a 148% increase in strikes. 2016 had the highest numbers with over 7,000 nationwide. 2020 came in at the third highest with over 6,800 strikes. Without it even being over, 2021, this year, might come out on top with the most strikes.
We've been seeing a steady increase in these laser events reported against pilots, and our data for this year through October 31st showed a little over 7,700 laser strikes nationwide, and that's already more than we saw all of last year.
Laser strikes can happen anywhere. Every state in the country has reported them in the past 10 years. Georgia typically reports around 100 a year. Several airports, even in middle Georgia, have reported them as well. So what is a laser strike? It might seem harmless to point a laser at a plane overhead, but inside the cockpit, it's a completely different scene.
It looks as if like the sun is in your airplane, just everything goes green. And it's really, really bright and very dangerous because it blocks everything out.
That's because of how the insides of planes are built. Most material is metal and glass. That makes the tiny point of a laser into a much bigger problem.
So it's kind of like standing in a room full of mirrors and shining a light. It renders us basically unable to do our jobs as pilots.
Any pilot in any aircraft is at risk, but the bigger the craft, the bigger the potential impacts, especially if a pilot can't get their vision back.
Those aircraft not only contain the pilots who might be directly affected, but they're often full of hundreds of passengers in the back of that aircraft, and they're flying over the communities across our state.
That sort of drastic situation could happen with even the most experienced pilot. For instructors, especially ones that have been in laser strikes, their biggest concern is for their students and other inexperienced pilots.
I was flying with a private student, which is someone who doesn't have that many hours, and what concerned me is what he would have done if I wasn't in there. We don't train our students for that. This is something relatively new.
The education part of flying is trying to catch up to this new threat. Middle Georgia State University's flight school has not made a specific curriculum change, but they aren't ignoring the issue.
We've adopted awareness in all of our ground schools that we teach here, all the way from private up to being a flight instructor, even multi-engine commercial. It started with an awareness with our flight instructors as far as the staff here.
With part of that awareness, they've come up with ways to get away from laser strikes, including flying away from where they've been struck.
The biggest thing is remove yourself as a target, so all of your lights come off. Interior and exterior lights, which the interior should be pretty dim anyway. It's just like riding in a car.
There's no telling about why lasers are pointed at planes. Whether it's intentional or accidental, the impacts will always be the same.
I can only guess that lasers are becoming more and more available, and I believe people may not recognize the risks that are involved when they may decide to point a laser up at the sky. I don't know why they might be doing that.
Ultimately, laser strikes will need to be reported to the FAA. On purpose or not, fines could reach $11,000 per violation and could go over $30,000 for multiple ones. Local penalties could be even more severe. If that sounds like a lot, there's a simple way to avoid it.
Certainly have a lot of air traffic here in the state of Georgia. So I would generally say if you're thinking about pointing a laser up at the sky, don't do it. The risk is there. The odds of hitting an aircraft here in Georgia are going to be higher than they are in some other parts of the country.
A report from the U.S. Department of Transportation says they have seen a significant change in driver patterns and behavior since last March. That includes speeding and not wearing a seatbelt. Today, I want to find out how the pandemic may be contributing to this unsafe behavior behind the wheel.
It's a moment we all fear. The panic and pain of a car crash.
There's more aggression and speed.
Driver behavior has changed during the course of the pandemic, and not for the better.
When you drive on the highway, you recognize people are all of a sudden driving like it's the Autobahn.
Throughout many parts of the country and right here in Tennessee, traffic fatalities have been on the rise.
The crashes were extremely violent. The damage, the carnage.
Tennessee Highway Patrol Lieutenant Bill Miller says speeding is the #1 contributing factor.
We're up 116 additional people killed on Tennessee roadways. That's extremely disturbing.
But Vanderbilt professor Jonathan Metzl, who teaches a course about COVID's impact on society, says the pandemic may be impacting the psychology of some drivers.
Where people just are thinking, oh, gosh, the rules that governed us before all of this really aren't as important as they once were. And so it's a general sense of mistrust of rules and authority.
Plus, he says the pandemic has politicized public health, and driver safety laws like speed limits are public health interventions.
And so just the idea that we're all going to play by the same rules to keep each other safe is something that's been really thrown up for grabs during the pandemic.
But Lieutenant Miller says it really all comes down to driver choice.
And that's what we need to get you to drive home, is that each driver has his or her own responsibility to control the most dangerous piece of equipment they're ever going to have in their hands, and that's the motor vehicle.
Quick decisions behind the wheel that can impact the rest of your life.
Chattanooga Police Department data shows a somewhat different trend. Although car crashes are up this year compared to last, they are still lower than pre-pandemic levels in the city.
When your child's teacher is out sick or takes a personal day, who's filling in? A new person in Hamilton County Schools is lowering the requirements that substitutes have to meet to cover the classroom. The question now is it a good thing?
People don't go into this profession for the money. They go into it because they love kids.
Though being a substitute teacher is not the easiest job, Leanne Weaver Ash says she does it because she enjoys it.
I know it's got the perks. You have the holidays off and summers off, but it's for the kids, and you love coming in here and just loving on them and, give them your love and your expertise, whatever it may be.
A new school board policy in Hamilton County is removing a requirement to test any subs that don't have 60 hours of college credit. But education advocates are not all on the same page on whether this is a good thing.
I think it's particularly going to be hard hit in some of the most difficult challenges that you have. But I also think that you're not going to have much of a opportunity to do anything else.
We are desperate for substitutes. Lowering the expectations is a way to attract more people who would be willing to do that.
And the problem is happening across the country. According to an Education Week survey of administrators nationwide, 77% say they have struggled to hire a sufficient number of subs. But this sub knows the demand for subs and the demands of the classroom firsthand.
I think if you have less of an education or quality, I think if you do it, it's because you want to do it and you love kids, and you're going to do everything you can to do the best you can.
Hamilton County School Board passed this policy last week, and it goes to effect immediately.